Hi, I'm David and welcome to the Datasaurus-Rex podcast, where we interview data visualization experts and get to know them and their data viz that little bit better. By the end, you should learn new skills and get inspired to enhance your own data viz game. Today's guest is Bo McCready, who I happened to find on r/dataisbeautiful and was blown away by his more cows than people viz. But then I got to see the rest of his gallery and was like amazed, so I had to have him on the show. So thank you so much for being here, Bo.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to chatting.
Cool. And so for those of you who are new to the podcast, any of the vizzes or websites we talk about, I'll put them down in the show notes or description below. And for those of you on the audio podcast, there is a video version, again, in the show notes. And whilst Bo's answering questions, I'm just going to play around with the viz so we can kind of see how it works and everything like that. So amazing. Okay, so we're going to jump straight in. And the first half of this podcast is revolving around getting to know this viz, which I'm going to bring up on screen now. And it is the more cows than people, but it's a bit more than that, and we'll find out soon. But yeah, so let's dive in. So, Bo, what was the inspiration for this data viz?
Yeah, so I had decided that this was the year that I wanted to take a shot at Tableau's Iron Viz competition and see how that would go. So once the data set came out for that, which was based around the 2012 agricultural census in the United States, I started looking through the variables that were there, and right away it was a pretty overwhelming, messy data set, and I thought, okay, we got to get pretty quickly down to a narrow subset of this that I can tell a story around. And I happened to grow up in rural Wisconsin, it's a big farming part of the country, and one of the expressions you hear a lot in the northern U.S. is, there's more cows than people there, and so that was kind of kicking around in my head as I scrolled through and saw that there were these variables in the data set about livestock, and I thought, hey, I wonder. They gave you a complementary data set that had the population of each county to go along with it, and I thought,
nice.
I think I have the stuff here to. Wouldn't it just be funny to know where are there actually more cows than people? And I just did kind of a little series of calculations and put together a map, and that was the start of the project.
Wow, that's amazing. That's great inspiration. And you kind of, it is a funny phrase because I think we were chatting on email before this, and that phrase is stuck in my head too, just from a video game, Command & Conquer Red Alert 2. There's just a throwaway line. This guy mentions it, and
I remember it well.
I know Canada, more cows up here than people. Well, let's get to work.
Yeah, and I'm just like, yeah, that must happen because where do all the cows live? It's like, yeah. So no, it's really cool, but you've actually brought it to life and have proved that. And again, due to your great viz, I can instantly figure out where the most cows per people are, and it's Kennedy in Texas, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's something that I guess obviously we'll get to this. I learned so much from the data playing around with not just cows but other types of livestock, and I think we talked about how I got started with the work, and you mentioned that you saw this graphic that I posted on Dataisbeautiful, and I think for me, I had a whole, once I came up with the more cows than people concept, I had a whole plan to kind of dive further into that and just build everything out around cows. And then I thought, just for the heck of it, I would put that map up on Reddit and see if people reacted to it, see if it seemed to resonate with anybody. And the way that took off was really pretty surprising and pretty incredible. And I think that taught me, or that showed me that, this is your hook. Like, this is just do this kind of thing and dig into this a little bit more, and and keep going. So
exciting. So you kind of validated it via Reddit, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice. Yeah, and I think that's one of the huge benefits of really sharing any kind of this work online in any capacity. The iteration process is really, really important, and putting up something that is not quite perfect yet, or is maybe an early draft, or just floating an idea out there. It helps me a lot in the creative process, for sure.
Totally, and I saw a lot of good constructive comments, like asking questions, and I'm sure that helped factor into like how you iterated too, which is good. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, cool. So yeah, if there's ever a cow uprising, I'm going to avoid Kennedy, Texas, Cherry, Nebraska, and Garfield, Montana, because there's more than 70 cows per person. I wouldn't even want to fight one cow, to be fair, not let alone 70.
Moo, 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 moo.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Next question. Well, I guess you already covered this. How did you collect the data? So maybe we pivot it. How did you find the data? Like, what made you stumble upon this livestock data?
Yeah, so this was the kind of official competition data set for the Iron Viz competition. So I know some of the past feeder events you've had to source your own data. One of the big changes this time was everybody gets the data set provided to you. Definitely took a little bit of cleaning to get it into better shape, but wasn't actually a whole lot of work hunting it down this time. It was right there and ready to go. So,
okay, that's cool. And just for those listeners or viewers who don't know, Iron Viz, this is the feeder. This is the kind of like tryouts, I guess, to get into the main stage at the Tableau conference.
Yeah, this is my first time participating, but my understanding is there will be 3 feeder competitions this year. The winner of each feeder then becomes one of the onstage competitors this fall.
Yeah, and it's great because I guess it brings in a lot of talent, a lot of different ways to make creative, awesome business, but also the thrill of probably being up on stage with like 10,000 people at the Tableau conference in America. I've been an audience member every time I've been, but I'm sure it'd be quite a ride to be actually on stage building a viz with a time pressure.
Definitely.
So yeah. Well, it looks like you're in a good shot with this. Hopefully, fingers crossed to get through to the next thing. Cool. Okay. Next question. So how do you go about approaching this? Because you could have just blasted up a ton of bar charts or just I guess from what I can see is there's a lot of considered subtle design choices behind this, and I guess I'd love for us in the audience to maybe understand how you went about it. Did you just start building in Tableau? Did you start sketching?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think so. You're right. There are definitely a lot of subtle little choices and tweaks that I made while I was doing this. To be honest, I didn't do a lot of sketching on the front end of this one. My style with this, or really pretty much any viz, is to kind of get in and start messing with the data and really just trying to, almost draw pictures with what's in that data as quickly as I can. And with the county level granularity here, I thought we would just check out some county level maps and see what's going on. And I think in general, my style is maybe a little bit different from a lot of what you tend to see in things like Iron Viz or competitions like this, looking at some of the past entries. A lot of people in the Tableau world do these kind of longer form story vizzes where you scroll down for a while and dig really deeply into a topic like that. I think with my kind of academic and professional background, I tend to focus a little bit more on making vizzes where you can get to really the essence of what's there really within a few seconds of looking at it. And so I think for me, I really had a goal of just doing something where you can get to that story really, really quickly, and also do it in a way where it would, definitely be great as a viz with interactivity and the ability to dive in a little bit more, but also just work just fine as a static image as well if somebody wasn't going to engage with it in that interactive way. So I think I just came in general, and I really come into most of my vizzes thinking, how can I design this in a way where the interactivity enhances it and makes it better and helps somebody learn something else? But also just kind of works as a standalone project. And, even if you never click on anything, you're still going to get the story that I want you to get out of it.
Totally. No, that's a great way to approach it, like that kind of multifaceted thing. Because again, I guess people they may not be able to interact or they don't want to. So yeah, if you can still design for both parties who do and don't, like here, I'm looking at it right now and you can just quickly get the insight that I don't know what you call it, like the middle of America. That's where a lot more cows to people ratio is.
Sure.
But again, if I live in these areas, I can quickly explore and click and play around. So, and then equally, I guess I'll do it now. So like, when you brought in as extra livestock, like, if you click on the, so like the pig icon or the chicken, I love how it just changes, but also how you've used a different color palette so people know it's still the same viz, but the different dimension. So what made you choose that rather than just have like just the name change? You like pretty much the whole color scheme changes. So what was your thought process behind that?
Yeah, I think after I switched the data or created the extra variables to do this for pigs, that was the next one I looked at, and I thought, it was immediately, even when I was using the same colors that I used for cows, it was just different. It was a different story. You had color intensity in different places, and I thought, what better way to magnify that difference further than to just completely change the color palette and have you know that you're looking at something else that works as a standalone product, but can, tell a story in the same way that's, the other livestock do. And I think I had worked on a project about a week before this, looking at the history of different positions, how often they were taken in the NFL draft, which is going on as we talk right now. And one of the things I tried with that project is my first draft was a really unconventional neon color palette that you wouldn't normally apply to football, but I just thought, hey, let's try this out and see how it looks. And I don't know if it totally worked, and so I duplicated it and made a parallel version that used kind of a little more traditional football colors, some reds and browns and tans, and had set up a button to just kind of toggle between them. And so that concept of basically toggling between two really similar vizzes but on totally different color palettes was something I had done as I was iterating with that NFL draft project. And since that idea was fresh, I brought it forward to this one.
Amazing, cool. And I've just been exploring, looking at all the different insights from different animals, and it's really cool. I love it. And then also your summary one where you just look at the overall numbers, and then you've got that kind of combined map. So you kind of trained people, pink is pigs, blue are goats, that kind of stuff, and then you bring it all together. So it's definitely rewarding people who engage and interact with it. But again, it works on even if they only check one animal or if they check all of them. I really like it. Yeah,
for sure. Thank you. And that's, as you mentioned, kind of the design choices that are made throughout the process. I like to, whenever possible, have a color kind of tie throughout a viz or a project or a series of things, so that so you know what you're looking at, and even if you don't necessarily realize it, the color's been associated with a certain thing, and you carry that through to the end. So little choices, little tweaks, but for people who are getting started with Tableau or doing anything like this for the first time, I think those are those little choices that make something a little more intuitive, even if they're not as obvious.
No, totally. And I'm going to take a guess here, but just you got the functionality with the buttons when you click on different animals. Does that just take you to a different dashboard within the worksheet? Okay, that's great.
Yeah. So everything I did here, every time I started with a new animal, I just duplicated what was there with cows before, and then changed out the formulas and changed the color palettes from there. So it's all separate dashboards. You basically got for each of the 5 livestock types in there, you have 5 copies of the same thing, each one using a few different formulas and a different palette.
Right. No, that's great. And I feel this is again better. It's more interactive because you see a chicken, you're going to click it and expect a chicken, which you do. Whereas if some people didn't do that and you just relied on the tabs at the top, sure, they'd still be descriptive with the words and say what they are, but wouldn't be as fun and wouldn't be as intuitive, I guess. So, or encourage as much interactivity.
Those dashboard navigation buttons, they're just really fun to play around with too. Like you can do some pretty cool stuff with that. And it was that was just the way I wanted to go.
Perfect. No, it's definitely working. I love it. Okay, next question. Here we go. So what was the best insight or insights you got from this viz around the data?
Yeah, I think there's a ton. I think when I first swapped out the data from pertaining to cows to pertaining to pigs, I guess I just hadn't really thought about the regional differences that were going to emerge when you did that. I had kind of thought naively that, agricultural areas are agricultural areas, and, you won't necessarily see such obvious differences. But to me, I mean, you see it in the end at the summary map, but you also see it when you're looking at each of the livestock individually. There just really are some pretty serious regional variations in the way that we raise animals in America. And I just didn't know that. I didn't know how it played out. And so definitely a lot of learning for me in that sense. I also just moved about a month ago from Wisconsin to Texas to start a new job down here.
Oh, cool.
And I very quickly learned that I now live, just east of the part of the country where goats are the most prevalent relative to people. And I never would have guessed that, never would have known that if I didn't play around with this data set. So I mean, those are a couple of big things that stick out to me. Otherwise, really most of these places where the ratios are really extreme, which I highlight in the viz, a lot of them are places where not a lot of people live. So when I added just those little comments about the top places on either one, I did some background reading on each place just to get a little facts to pull out. So, in that sense, I learned a lot about a lot of communities that I never would have thought about otherwise.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at the little summaries now and again. Love how you color coded them again to the animals, but yeah, I didn't know that there was a pork belt where there's just that concentration of pigs, and the cows are just pretty much everywhere. Yeah, and then as you mentioned, like the goats, it sounds obvious now when you call out in your viz, like they thrive in hilly, rocky areas. But I didn't really think about that. But then that might explain why there's like more localized special areas within the US on that. So it's, there's I guess chickens. What's this on the southeast?
Yeah, generally, in the southeast, and I mean, I think I also just learned a lot about really just factory farming and some of the challenges that causes. Some of these counties that really rise up to the top are places where you have huge numbers of animals being raised in not great conditions, and just wasn't something I had thought about a ton before I dug into this data.
No, but that is interesting. There's a lot of the whole mass production, like mass farming at scale. It's not always pretty, sadly. But it's great. But like you've taken just like a simple like, where are more cows than people? But then it allows you to kind of go deep and know where to research, because you're not just gonna. How would you know to look in this area for the pork like production? It kind of good data viz will like guide you into further research. Because it doesn't just have to stop at that viz and the numbers. It allows you to kind of go deeper if you want. Whereas I think anytime any of us are doing this kind of work, I mean you learn so much from the outliers, and this is really no exception. I mean, I was calculating ratios and looking for the deepest colors, and what do we learn from those extreme values? And that's something that here I applied to livestock, but any of us who do this for a career, that's something we're doing all the time, whatever data sets we're working with. Totally. It's funny because it can just make you a subject matter expert really quickly. I remember having a similar insight when I was visualizing the word count of the Queen's speech, the UK Queen's speech, every year. And there were two, and it was kind of like trending upwards, but there were two pronounced like really low dips. And then I just quickly typed in those 2 years, and that's when I found out she was just pregnant with her two kids. Wow. So, but again, I wasn't a royal expert. I'm not going to just research the entire history and try and piece it together. Those two dips allowed me to kind of focus and then go, oh, that's the reason. That makes sense, and just move on. And
no, that's great. And I think that's just a great example of I think one of my favorite things about creating work like this, and why I do the data work. Viz for fun is you can just learn so much sometimes from plotting shapes and just seeing like where is this variance emerging, and like really all we're doing is looking for differences in colors, differences in vertical position, differences in size, and we're doing that from like large quantitative data sets, and you get stories that way. Like you get stories in a way that's when people who dismiss this kind of work, say things like, you can't reduce people to numbers and all of that. Like, you don't want to reduce people to numbers, but, working with those numbers brings those human stories out.
Totally, yeah. Otherwise, you're just blinded by and you're like, where do I start? How do I get? Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, there's definitely a balance there, and just finally, again, just because of this good design, I've just it's made me think too. A good data viz will bring your stakeholders or audience like up to speed. They've gone from like zero knowledge of a topic and now to become sort of semi subject matter experts. And I find just even in our jobs, we do this kind of stuff too, right? You go to your boss or your client and go, you knew nothing. I've now helped you like get up to speed in like seconds with good data viz. And I guess that's the reason I mention it is, if you do it well, that's effective and it works. So if you don't, it confuses people. But like, this is why I love your viz here, because it's so accessible because of all the thought and consideration you put in to make it, all the insights pop out.
Yeah, and I think that's a big reason I designed this way too. Just as I do reflect on my career, I got my master's in public policy and my doctorate is in educational leadership. So I've spent my career on a day-to-day basis really helping policymakers and leaders and decision makers know what to do pretty quickly by taking information and synthesizing it into something that they can hold in their hands and look at and know what's going on really fast. So, I've built that as kind of a career specialty of mine. And I think that informs whether I realize it or not, the way I design these vizzes.
No, that's great. And it's definitely a very sought after skill. So yeah, you've done well to invest in this. And I think it's just a message to anyone else. Like, so when you see people make data vizzes outside of their work for fun like this, there's something happening in the background. I mean, sure, they're having fun, they're making stuff and it's going to help them get into like competitions like IronViz, but equally they're refining their skills. They're getting new data sets, challenging themselves and just kind of creating a behavior where they can just automatically bring it back into their work and then succeed even more. So I'd encourage anyone to kind of just participate in whichever project, whether it's Makeover Monday, Workout Wednesdays, IronViz Feasors, IronQuest, whatever you want. Just play around and you'll get so much more out of it than just a chart.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And because Bo, you were saying you've only really sort of been getting into all this stuff in the last year or so, right?
In terms of
publicly,
in terms of doing this kind of work publicly, it's been really a newer thing for me. I did a local IronViz competition with my local Tableau user group up in Wisconsin. I competed in that. I think that was last May, and through that experience, had the opportunity through our local Tableau user group leader, Pat McCormick. He got me a spot in a tip battle at the 2018 Tableau conference. And so, through that, it was kind of this like, give some advice on Tableau in a tournament format. And I was in that tournament with Kevin Flerlich, who you've emailed on here, or who you've interviewed on here. Yeah. And, Zen Masters, Ann Jackson, Luke Stanky, Chantilly Jaggernauth were in that. And so Simon Beaumont was there. Yeah, so just a lot of really good folks. I got to share the stage with them and be part of that whole experience. And, it went well for me. Everybody was nice. And the experience was, just really, really productive. And from there, I thought, okay, it's time to break this distrust I have of Twitter and make an account and try this out. So although I've been using Tableau professionally for a really long time, using it personally for creative projects like this, really probably only for 6 or 7 months.
Wow, amazing. No, and we'll see your like gallery, Tableau public gallery soon, but I'm just amazed by all the stuff you've been pushing out there. So you probably have to have you back and go through some of those other vizzes later on, but it's incredible stuff. So excellent. Right. Next question is, what skills did you learn in the creation of this viz?
So I think everything I did in this viz from a technical standpoint was really mostly things I'd done before. Creating calculated fields to have ratios and draw multiple variables together. That was stuff I'd done before. I think I learned some really important things about design while I did this. And, I mentioned a little bit earlier that, just that kind of basic more cows to people map. I didn't think that was going to become the core of everything. But I put it out there. I watched people react to it. It got people talking. It resonated. And so I think from a process standpoint, I learned just a little bit more about the value of putting something out there that isn't perfect yet, that isn't fully formed. If I look back to that original Reddit post, there was a county in New Mexico that just wasn't even on my map. So thankfully someone pointed that out, and that got fixed. But so I guess it's a skill, just not a technical skill in learning to share an incomplete version, bring feedback in, and have that inform kind of the way you're going to finish the project. That's something I just did really consciously with this one. That was new. I'd say I also just learned a little more specific technical skill. The navigation buttons that I have at the bottom right there, that are all the little animal icons. That was something I'd never tried before. So learning how to use dashboard navigation buttons based on an icon that are going to bounce you from place to place was a new one for me.
Perfect. No, they're both great skills, and it's good to see they're not just all technical skills, they're like soft skills too, on having that mindset, send something out, validate it, get feedback. It's a very healthy approach, whereas some people I've seen, they kind of maybe post and they get all defensive, and it's like, oh no, they're critiquing it, but that should be amazing. It's like, wow, people are actually giving good, as long as it's constructive, good feedback, which can only make the viz better. Yeah, absolutely. And I think even when the feedback that comes in, because Reddit has anonymity as a core feature, I made the unconventional choice of using my real name on there, and then just generally being nice to people. But there are some things that there are some things I've gotten on there that have not been kind at all. But at the same time, there's even truth in those things sometimes. What are they pointing out? What are they thinking about? Why are they not liking it? You can really learn from that. And I think, I went a little more than a year ago out to Stanford to do a training at their design school, and learned a little bit more about design thinking, prototyping, iterating, and how to go through that process. And I think I came back from that experience with the mindset that it's okay to put something out that isn't perfect, and let kind of the world help you bring it to the finish line. And I think when I adopt that philosophy with vizzes, which is sometimes easier said than done, but when you put something out that isn't perfect yet, it's I think a lot easier to take those critiques and not take them personally, because it's not right, and that somebody's going to point something out that you haven't done perfectly, and that's okay. It's not personal. It just makes the project better in the end. Yeah, no, totally. That's a very great way of doing it. I need to bring more of that into my work too. So if I take anything away from this is going to be the one. So no, that's great. Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Cool. Here's a good one. So you're making tons of great stuff. What's the next project or big project you're going to be working on? Can you tease anything? Oh yeah, I have a few ideas going right now. I think along with my gallery of things that I've published, there's also plenty that that just didn't really like how they were turning out, and left them on the cutting room floor. So a few concepts I'd like to get back to at some point. I have been thinking a little bit. So they just announced the cover athlete for the next Madden video game, and the Madden curse is kind of one of these things that people have been talking about for quite a while. That's this idea that once an athlete appears on the cover of that video game, something bad happens in their career, or things are worse after that. And really, that's something that I've seen written about a lot online. But I thought, hey, what if we brought some data to bear to answer that question of what really happens before and after someone gets featured. So that's brilliant. You dispel a myth with data, because now you mention it, it's called the curse of Madden, right, or something like that, or the Madden curse. Interesting. But I like that you're going to challenge it again. You hear this kind of anecdote myth, and now you're going to explore it like you did with this cow stuff. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. So that's I think that's probably the next one, and from there, who knows? Cool. And we were discussing offline, but I think it's up on the screen now, your Twitter handle. Speaking of sport, I do like that you've got like Bo knows data. It's that comes from is it Bo Jackson? So that's
when I first joined Twitter, I was happy that that handle was available. I'm a big sports fan, and I think I'm right probably on the bottom end of the age bracket who knows and remembers who Bo Jackson was. But I liked it. I thought I would go with it. It kind of works as a standalone, even if you don't know.
The reference. Yeah.
You know what the reference is, but if you do, it's a little something extra.
Yeah, I like that. The icing on the cake. No,
no,
that's good. It's good. I try and do that with some of my videos, like put little silly, subtle side gags in. If people get them, great. If they don't, it doesn't ruin the video. So it's that's cool.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. No, excited to see that and everything else. So again, it'll be in the show notes and description, but I'll put a link to Bo's gallery below. And going through all of these, even just scrolling through, I kind of want to take a good few hours to actually go check many of them out, like in detail. They all look brilliant and creative, and I'm sure I can learn a lot from them. So yeah, brilliant. Okay, before we get into the rapid fire section, is there anything you'd like to promote before we get on? Or
I wouldn't say I have any specific projects that I want to promote. I think in general, since I am, relatively new to this world and relatively new to doing it publicly, at least, pretty much everything I put up is going to be, it's going to be on my Twitter. It's going to be on my Tableau public page. So, if you keep an eye on those, you'll see pretty much everything I'm coming out with. I think the only other thing I'll throw out there is, as some of my posts have gotten a little more popular over the last couple of months, I've had people just kind of reach out, through a message or a comment or something like that, and ask for feedback on something or ask for advice about how to get started with this kind of work, which is a new thing for me. But I think I'll say in general, I've done the same thing to people I admire who are doing this kind of work, and with this community in general, even kind of the biggest names in the data visualization world are, often more than willing to give advice or take a look at something or just have some kind and constructive feedback on something you're working on. So, so I'll just say in general, if you see anything I've worked on that you're curious about, really don't hesitate to reach out and ask, and I'd be happy to talk about it. And I think the same goes for most of the creators posting this kind of work publicly.
That's great. Thanks, Bo. It's that's really awesome of you to say, to offer that to everyone. And also you touch upon a good note about the community. I'm always humbled by, no matter how new or old or like famous a lot of the people in the community are, there's always a common theme of people just helping each other out, trying to push everyone upwards, and just a general sense of positivity. Especially even though, I think the veterans, they doesn't go to their head. They're like, "Who are you? Why are you talking to me?" They're like, "Oh yeah, great, okay. Well, I've done a post on this. If you go here, or let's have a look at this." They're like, it's so humbling to know, because I think they know the community is, the community is what you put into it, right? And I think
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's one of the things that makes the Tableau world just really special, because one of the reasons that I say that if anyone has a question about something, reach out, is that I started doing that even last fall when I started publishing, and just got some really kind and helpful advice from people who are some of the biggest names in this work. And it was a big contrast for me. Since I did get my PhD, I had done the academic route for a while, and I had been to academic conferences and done those kinds of presentations and experiences. And to be honest, a lot of the time those environments just feel kind of cutthroat and competitive, and everybody's waiting to point out the flaws with your project. And once I started transitioning to doing more work, in the Tableau world and the data visualization community, it's like everybody recognizes that we all get ahead by everybody doing better work. And so if we're all supporting each other, we're all just making the community better. We're making the field stronger. And there's a lack of that, tendency to step on other people to get ahead. And I just think that's really wonderful and really special.
Share that sentiment completely. It's very awesome to be part of this. So like everyone is. Yeah, that's great. Great, man. Okay, cool. So now we're into rapid fire questions, where we get to know a little bit more about Bo and his journey on DataViz, but just about some of his thoughts and theories too around the topic. So let's start off with a fun one. Pie charts, do you love them or loathe them?
Yeah, I think this is a really great question. So I think in general, there's rarely a situation where a pie chart is the best choice to communicate the information that you're trying to communicate. That being said, I think really pretty much everything has its place from time to time. And what I think about when I'm thinking about things like pie charts, there's a 1984 study, and I don't know that off the top of my head. I looked it up before we talked tonight. In the Journal of the American Statistical Association by Cleveland and McGill, and so this is a study that I've read and I've talked about in a few different presentations on data visualization that I've given, and basically what they did is they showed a bunch of test subjects. Like quantitative figures that were represented in a bunch of different ways, pie charts, bar charts, like a lot of these different types of ways that we're all used to presenting information. And they asked their participants to estimate the values that were represented by those graphics. And then they recorded the results and recorded the errors in estimation. And so and there's actually a version of the results of that study that's adapted and reprinted in Alberto Cairo's book, which was the first time that I interacted with it. And so the two big takeaways for me are, one, yes, the human eye is better at perceiving certain types of differences, and things like angles. We do struggle a little bit more with those. We have probably the worst estimates when we're trying to figure out what an angle represents. So pie charts, probably a little tougher. But the other thing that has struck me about the results of that study is that, even those things that we're not quite as good at perceiving, we're still pretty good at perceiving them. Like the average errors in what we're estimating are not that they're maybe highest for pie charts, but they're still not all that high. So I think if you're trying to tell a really simple story, and if the precision of what you're showing doesn't really matter quite as much, if you just want to show, hey, one thing is a lot bigger than another thing, pie charts are familiar to people, and that might be the place to use them. If you're okay with people just getting a generic judgment from your graphic, and if it doesn't matter, the difference between 77 and 75, if you don't need them to get that and figure that out, sure, use a pie chart.
Okay, that's great. No, that's the first time we've had peer-reviewed researched responses in this answer, but it's great to hear, because again, it's you can just have an opinion and they're all valid, and I've got a wide spectrum of responses on this, but most of them do come back to it depends. Probably the use case is quite small, but they definitely not. I don't think anyone's written them off yet completely.
Sure.
So that's great to hear. I'm going to go to check that out, and if I can find it, I'll put the link down below too.
Okay. Yeah.
Great. Okay, this is a good one. So, what publications for DataViz do you follow regularly?
I think for me, I really do just kind of keep an eye on my Twitter feed. I try to follow a lot of people whose work I think is interesting, and the biggest thing for me is seeing the projects that other people are posting. That's where most of the inspiration comes from. I think this isn't necessarily a new publication, but my journey with data visualization in general started back in 2012. I went to a seminar in Chicago taught by Edward Tufte, and one of the things you get as part of the quite high admission fee to his seminars is a nice boxed copy of all 4 of his books. So I still keep those on my bookshelf as kind of publications that I reference on a regular basis. I think sometimes his work is a little bit too dogmatic, and I think there's maybe more flexibility in the way to do things than he implies sometimes. But those aren't fresh, but they definitely started me on my journey.
It's funny you say that, because I don't have it on my bookshelf now, but it was one of his books which got me into DataViz about 14 years ago. But again, it's like an eye opener. You don't read it and then become an expert, but it still gets you to suddenly, it changes your perception and your understanding of, oh wow, DataViz is this considered field. It's been iterative and progressing. And yeah, it's really interesting to hear when other people mention how tough these got them into data viz too. It's it's cool. And yeah, good call on Twitter too. I think I don't use Twitter apart from just interacting with the data viz community, and it tends to be a good source to like follow people, keep up to date on the work. So that's great. Great. Okay, here's a good one. So what is your number one trick for in Tableau for anyone who's new to the program?
I think my number one trick that pertains to the viz that we were talking about a little bit earlier is just duplicate things. And I mean that in a lot of ways. Duplicate things when you're making a new version, duplicate things when you're changing colors. I still, if I want to try a calculation and I'm not sure if it's going to work yet or mess everything up, I'll duplicate the tab and try something in the new one, and then erase the old one if it worked, and delete the new one if it didn't. So I just think copying and pasting is a good trick across a lot of software, but definitely when you're getting started, just duplicate things so you're not either recreating something from scratch that you don't have to, or so you're not making a mistake that you can't go back from. Yeah,
no, that's just a really good idea, because that probably disheartens people if they just only use one version and they make a mistake, but they carry on and they don't realize, and then there's no way to go back on that. And I've been there. So yeah, I think having this kind of semi non-destructive behavior where if you do fork off and it's good, you keep it. If not, you've lost nothing, because you can just hit the reset button technically again. So that's a really good thing. Yeah, and it encourages exploration without fear of like irrevocable damage to your viz or wasting of time. So
yeah, definitely.
That's a great tip. Thank you. Okay. What is your most favorite chart type?
Oh yeah. Okay. So I'm picturing it in my head, and I'm not sure that I'm going to get the technical term right, but I think I've heard it referred to as a circle strip plot or something like that. So basically just those graphic types where you're going to see a lot of data points represented by a circle just spread out horizontally or vertically, so you can really quickly see clustering or outliers. I wish I knew the right term, because there probably is one, but you see them in vizzes all the time. You see them in my vizzes all the time. But just a bunch of little circles with a little jitter, so you can see your patterns really quickly of highs, lows, clusters, outliers. I always get a lot out of making and looking at those kinds of charts.
Cool. Well, don't worry. For the magic of editing, we will make sure that appears on the screen in
that
post.
Sounds good. Yeah, you can make me sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I do that all the time for me too, so it's all good. Power of editing. Okay. Here's a good. Well, they're all good questions. I think I'm being biased, but what is the? So you use Tableau. Do you have any other tools or software that you use in your data viz day-to-day world?
Yeah, so there's a few that stick out to me. So when I'm doing creative vizzes for Tableau Public, next to my copy of Tableau Desktop, I pretty much always have Publisher open, and I know a lot of folks like to do shapes and images in PowerPoint. I basically do the same thing within Publisher. So most of my vizzes are going to have some image files overlaid somewhere, usually text or headers or something like that, that I want to render properly. And so I pretty much always have Publisher open side by side to help me create those little images that I can bring in.
Cool. No, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and then my day job kind of thing, just use Microsoft SQL Server a lot, and then I'd say I've also used Stata, which is just a statistical analysis software. Use that quite a bit for kind of some of the heavier lifting. That's probably less connected to the Tableau work, but I definitely have tried from time to time, not in public projects, but in work-related things to take kind of some of those heavier statistical models and see how they can translate in Tableau.
No, that's great. That's perfect, because I think Tableau's a great tool. It's super versatile, but I think we've had the phrase on this podcast before, like if you have a hammer, you treat everything like a nail. And so having like a broader skill set of tools or broader tool set is going to definitely be beneficial. Like image creation, heavier statistical analysis, like But I think, yeah, just place for Tableau most of it. But just, yeah, rely on, or don't rely on it completely. Use other things when they're better for that task. So
Yeah, absolutely.
that's good to hear. Yeah, nice. So you said you've been using Tableau not in the public domain for quite a while. So what was your first version of Tableau when you first touched it?
Yeah, I think it would have been version 7. So I got my first copy of Tableau in November of 2012, and I think at that point it's version 7 that we were on. So whatever was the most current at that time. So it's been a real journey from there to where we are right now for functionality and interface and everything. It's it's really a whole different world.
Totally, and even just those small quality of life things, like with the navigation buttons you've used in your most recent viz, those are, things other companies would be like, oh, that's just too low priority, we don't care. But the Tableau again just listens. If there's enough need for it, they're going to build it in, which I love seeing. And then they get to enable people to make even better vizzes, like you've made with this. I mean, sure, you could probably do it in a hacky way, but why not save that time and spend more of your time making the viz better than having to hack it, I guess. So
absolutely. I mean, it's the little features sometimes, but once we finally got transparent sheets, the design options that opened up for everybody, it's it's just a huge jump in the quality of what you were seeing.
Totally. Yeah, no, I forgot about that one. That's awesome too. It's there's so many times where you thought it could be done, and then you go, oh yeah, I can, and then you're like, oh nope, I can't. But now, my brain's going back to those times where I was like, I got blocked. But now, I can go back and try and leverage that functionality.
I remember one of the first projects I worked on in Tableau in 2012. Now we have great geospatial file integration, and back in the day we were taking shapefiles and opening them in ArcGIS and doing some kind of projection to end up with this really long Excel file so you could plot geographies within Tableau. And, we got there and we got our custom geographies plotted, but it was just a heck of a process. And to think that all you really have to do right now is just drag and drop. It's it's amazing how much more efficient things are.
Totally, yeah. And, and it's great. Every bit of thing, every feature they make just improves quality of life, speeds you up. You can just do more in less time. And it is funny, with geo stuff, I always get a bit salty because I remember when I was in Australia in those user groups, every time we had a Tableau developer or rep there, they were like, "What features do you want?" And geos outside of America, granular ones, and they'd be like, "Oh." Anything else? It's but I think they've realized now, they've got the audience is global, and they've really driven that home now. And I love, pretty much most of the large countries, you can get crazy level detail postcode stuff. So they do listen. Sometimes it takes longer than others, but
right.
Geo, I'm a bit like, oh, come on, we've been asking for ages, but we got that. Great. Speaking of features, is there one which doesn't exist now inside of Tableau which you'd really love to see?
All right, I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to name 3, but I'm going to do them really quickly.
No, that's cool.
So one, I think, particularly within Tableau Public, is better support of more different fonts. And I think I've heard some people wonder if that's kind of a more for fun feature versus a necessary feature. And I do think it is a little more practical in that I think a lot of organizations who want to publish their work publicly have a brand that they want to stay consistent to. And I think part of staying on brand sometimes is using the same kind of font families that you're using in your other materials. So, I wish there was better font support for my creative projects so I could just, work directly within Tableau to create those headers with, some of the custom fonts I like to use. But, I do think there's a practical use case for that as well to help organizations tie their brand together. I think my second really quick one is just higher resolution image exports of worksheets and dashboards. I think because I do like to make a lot of things that stand on their own as a static image. Sometimes you get a little bit of blurriness, especially when you zoom in. And so I'd love really, really high resolution exports of Tableau content. I think the third one, and I guess, I mentioned using Stata earlier, so I'm not necessarily sure Tableau has to integrate things like this, but I think some of the statistical analysis that you can do within Tableau is, useful, but I think there are maybe some ways to push it a little bit further, maybe just a little bit better support of, kind of regressions and estimates. I did a Makeover Monday. I think it was earlier this year where I just took the data in the Makeover Monday to illustrate how you could kind of hack plotting residuals within Tableau, which is something that's like very easy to do within a lot of statistical analysis software. You can pull it off in Tableau by kind of, fake plotting a regression equation and then calculating the differences between, the results of that equation and the points you're actually plotting. So it works, but, it's not that complicated of a concept. And I think, if I can hack it by coming up with a few calculated fields, stuff like that could come into the software probably pretty easily.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's awesome. If it's not a feature request already, we should totally make one and get people up to vote it. And perfect. No, that's great. Thanks. Yeah, no, I'm always open to having more feature requests on this. I think we had Mike sitting near us, and he was like, "Okay, can I have 3?" And then he starts counting down from 10, and I'm like, "Oh!" But he was just messing with me, which is great. Okay, Bo. So no, this has been awesome. We've reached the end, and thank you so much for being on this podcast. Is there anything else we may have missed you'd like to just mention before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered everything. Just wanted to say thank you. This has been a blast. This is my first time guesting on a podcast, so
cool.
It's been a fun experience for me too. And looking forward to seeing how it turns out, and looking forward to seeing what you do in the future.
Cool. Thanks, Bo. That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out the show notes for everything we've covered today. And if you're new to the podcast, consider subscribing to stay up to date on all the latest episodes. Also visit datasaurus-rex.com/welcome to see all of the other data visualization content we have to help you out. Until the next time, thanks for watching, and thank you, Bo.
Thank you.